NBA execs, a quiet trade deadline when it comes to stars around the NBA being moved. How does that affect and impact the Chicago Bulls in their hopes to trade Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic? We're going to talk about all and more right after this.
You are Locked On Bulls, your daily Chicago Bulls podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Bulls, member of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every single day. I'm Hayes, host and creator of Chicago Bulls Central and Chicago Bears Central YouTube pages and podcasts. And today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Well, let's go ahead and get into it for today. So there's been a lot of trades, rumors, names, things, deals, projections made for the Chicago Bulls. Most recently, the Bulls have been listed as one of the favorites to land Bradley Beal, even though he came out and listed his teams that he would waive his no-trade clause. And as of yet, the Chicago Bulls are not one of the teams on that list. But the thing that I want to talk about isn't necessarily who the Bulls could be moving or should not be moving. It's more so that it seems like there's a growing contingent of NBA execs, of NBA pundits that are starting to hear and feel the rumblings that there may not be any big name stars moved at this trade deadline. Now, the one caveat thrown out here by Tim Bontemps is that anyone except Jimmy Butler, right? It does seem that there are a lot of teams right now that are reverse, saying this: the stiff trade market is due to a combination of money on teams' books, plus lack of draft capital among contenders, and most importantly, the collective bargaining agreement coming fully online this season. So, like we've seen with the Phoenix Suns, right? A team that reportedly is trying to convince Bradley Beal to waive his no trade clause, right? But that second tax apron is something that teams are extremely fearful of, to the point to where they're now not really even looking to make any moves, just to if it means staying clear of that second tax apron. So when you also do look at it, right, teams that, especially the players that the Bulls have available, Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic, Lonzo Ball to a certain degree, these are type of players that, of course, teams that are contenders would be looking to move. Now, there is a combination of lack of draft capital, but also teams wanting to hold on to their draft capital because of the depth in this draft as well. And I think that's an important piece to look at with this, because while, yeah, you may not be able to find a player in the 20s that's as good as Nikola Vucevic right away, but you may be able to find a player in the 20s that, hey, if you can develop them and you can draw out that talent and you can get the right guy, yeah, they may never turn into Vooch, but that doesn't mean they can't turn into a damn good center and rotational player for you, right? So it's those type of things that are being weighed right now. And I love that it seems like a lot of the NBA pundits are starting to come to this realization, instead of pushing this false trade narrative that are on a lot of teams, and just realize that, hey, teams just aren't looking to move off their draft capital because these players that are available are going to push them closer to the second tax apron, and teams are terrified of that. And I think that that's the right thing to happen in this case, right? That, and I've said this before over on Central, I've said it here, in no way should the Bulls be looking to make a move just to make a move. And that's that Bradley Beal rumor that was coming up. It's like, listen, not to say that maybe the Bulls didn't have some discussions, but it would be completely idiotic right now to try to make a move like that when Zach LaVine is playing at the level that he's playing. Zach LaVine is playing at an all-star caliber level. And so because of that, you'd be foolish to trade him for pennies on the dollar if teams aren't willing to come off some first-round picks. Run me those picks. Now, my more pessimistic Bulls fans are going to say, well, Hayes, the Bulls should have moved off their prior assets to get draft capital when they could have. And you're right. Should they have moved Andre Drummond for the 2 second-round picks? Yes. Should they have moved Alex Caruso and try to get just some additional draft capital on top of Josh Giddey? Yes. Should the Bulls have come to the realization that DeMar DeRozan wasn't going to be part of their future and moved him and got more back than a second-round pick in Chris Duarte? Yes. All those things can be true. But just because that was true then doesn't mean that now the Chicago Bulls should take and move Zach LaVine or move Vooch just to be able to say they got some picks back this time if the market just isn't of the value of those players. And that is what we're seeing right now. That is why you're seeing more people, like whereas it was initially talked about the Warriors trying to acquire a player like Jimmy Butler, you're hearing now, hey, maybe they're okay trying to get a Walker Kessler. Right? Even the Los Angeles Lakers that have been star hunting for the last 3 years, listen, they aren't looking to acquire any, like they got Dorian Finney-Smith. They still could be looking to pivot to make a move like for a Walker Kessler or something like that, but they're not even looking for the star level acquisitions anymore. The market is changing. And the way that it's changing is that it's in part because of the CBA, the depth of the draft coming up, those two things overlapping. Teams are being more protective of their assets. That just is what it is, right? Because now getting closer to the second tax apron, when you can hold on to your low first round pick in a deep draft and hope that you're going to get the right guy that you can develop, is a much different task than trading for a $40 million contract, a $25 million contract, that then you're looking and saying, well, we have no flexibility and we gave up our draft pick, so we can't even add young talent, right? So I think that it's the combination of those two things, and we could very well see this for the next 2 years. Keep in mind, the 2026 draft is shaping up to be pretty darn deep itself. So if teams are more protective of their draft capital, unless they're getting superstar level deals, you could see that a fairly quiet trade market for the next 2 years. You could see that, not just for the Bulls, but for teams overall in the NBA. And if that ends up being the case, listen, the market dictates a lot. You can only control the market so much. And you only have so much control over the value that other teams are placing right now and the value that they're holding their own first round picks at. You can't convince a team to give you something that they value highly unless you're giving up something valuable as well. And then at that point, you got to weigh the options, right? So for my Bulls fans that came into the season hoping and I think this is two separate things, but hoping that the Bulls were going to tank. Here's what everybody's telling you on that one. It's not going to happen. The Bulls aren't tanking. For those that were hoping that the Chicago Bulls were going to trade Nikola Vucevic and Zach LaVine, there's a chance that doesn't happen. You're looking at a realistic trade deadline now leading into the Chicago Bulls where Torrey Craig, maybe to a contender, maybe Lonzo Ball if the Bulls decide to pull that trigger. That's what you're more than likely looking at. It's not going to be some franchise-altering deal more than likely coming for the Chicago Bulls. Now, watch I say that, and then tomorrow morning, I'm sitting here talking to you guys about a blockbuster trade that went down, but it just does not seem like that's what the market is dictating right now. Shay, sometimes the best move is no move, especially if it doesn't benefit you in the long run. Facts, right? And as fans, we are able to have this mindset of looking for just the now, right? Whereas for an office, they got to look at the past, the present, and the future all at once. All at once. And they got to try to forecast some things. Now, the Bulls have not always been best in their evaluation of forecasting things. That is what's led to a lot of their value, their assets being devalued over time. But like I've said many times before, it seems like there's a contingent of the fan base that wants to see the Bulls make a move, even if it's bad, just so they can say that the Bulls finally made a move. And that's not where I want my front office at. Despite my, disheartening with the front office at times, you cannot make a move just to say that you made a move to shut people up. Any move that you have to make has to be, it either makes your direction more clear in the present or in the future. Even in the Zach LaVine trade, I've said it many times, the Bulls probably aren't going to win a Zach LaVine trade by the eyes of many in the fan base. But that doesn't mean that they didn't make a good deal, right? And that's where the Bulls are right now. If the market is not dictating that you have good deals out there, there's no point in moving, especially when Zach LaVine is playing at an all-star level. Joe the Blacksmith, if teams can't value Zach and Vooch for what they truly worth, heck, exactly. Like, you just got to move on at that point. If you're not valuing these players for what they're truly worth, and that is both these players are playing at a near all-star level, then what are we talking for? There's no point of us trying to talk business because clearly our values and our views are not aligned. So let's not talk about it. Let's not talk about it. And it seems like that's the stance that this front office takes. Now, does that mean that it's going to end up paying off for the Bulls in the long run? That remains to be seen, right? We got to see what's going to happen there. But at the end of the day, It's a risk either way. And like I've said many times before, there is no one path that clearly makes it better for the Bulls. There's a path that either paths have their own merits, but there's no one that's 100% going to make it better for the Bulls. And the Bulls right now seem to be erring on the side of let's maintain and hold this value that we have for our assets rather than sell low on them like we've done in the past. But you guys, as always, can let me know how you feel on that down below. We're going to continue with the next up. We're going to be talking about, I want to ask the question, does Billy Donovan actually deserve more credit than what us Bulls fans, some of us Bulls fans, are giving him? But first, we got to get to the message from one of our sponsors, and that is Ultimate GM.
You are Locked On Bulls, your daily podcast on the
Wrong one. Players mess up too. Listen, I'm cold. If y'all can't tell, I got on my starter jacket because it's cold here. With that said, man, I want to take a moment to introduce you to a brand new mobile game that I'm really excited about, Ultimate College Basketball Head Coach. If you ever dreamed of being a college basketball head coach, this is your chance to step into those shoes. In Ultimate College Basketball Head Coach, you control every detail of your program, from recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps, handling NIL deals, and managing scholarship. It's all in your hands. And when it comes to game time, you get to draw up offensive plays and set your strategy. The way you play won't just affect the current season. It will shape the future of your school's basketball program. It's a game that lets you feel the full weight of what it means to be a head coach and lead your team to glory. Here's a special offer for Locked On NBA listeners. Use promo code Locked On NCBB, all caps. That's Locked On NCBB, all caps, inside the game store to get a free boost for your program. It's the perfect way to kickstart your coaching career. To download Ultimate College Basketball Head Coach, just visit ultimatecbb.com or look it up in the app stores. Ultimate College Basketball Head Coach. Begin your coaching legacy today. More Locked On Bulls coming up next. All right, my Bulls fans, man. Before we get into this, I want to get into some of your guys' comments in regards to the trade value. Then we'll start talking a little bit about head coach Billy Donovan. I already read that one from Joe. In any deal, if you are acting out of haste and desperation, you are going to lose every time. 100% agree with you on that one. Shay, honestly, the realistic option I see is Zach LaVine getting traded in the offseason, maybe Vooch, but Zach has too much money. Listen, and keep in mind, the Bulls do not have to pay the trade kicker on Zach's option year. So if they were to wait, that's another year that the trade kicker, the percentage on that basically comes down. You got to pay less of that. So there is something to be said with that, Shay. Good call out there. Immortal Beast says the Bulls aren't undervalue their best players in trade just to get garbage in return. That doesn't benefit their future. That's 100% correct. Hayes, is the new CBA hampering the high-value trade market? If so, that's not good. Teams need to be allowed to improve freely in some regard. I mean, yes, but you have to do so within the confines of the organization that you work for. And so, yeah, it is limiting some of it. That's what the second tax apron was for. Keep in mind, more than anything, the NBA is trying to create a league of parity. And the thing that they are trying to also do is benefit it for people that grow and develop their own stars, that they have a higher chance to keep them, and they have a lot less of a flight risk. So that's a part of all of this as well, right? I think it's two-tone here. They don't want to see the teams that are just willing to pay into the luxury tax just keep paying and paying. Because keep in mind, the previous CBA, you could have kept acquiring more and more money. You just got to pay a higher tax bill. Now, basically, once you get into that second tax apron, it limits you so much that it's like, all right, now go out there and use what you did. You paid this higher tax bracket. Now let's go out there and see what you're getting out of it. So I think it holds franchises a little bit more accountable for their spending, which I don't think is a bad thing. At this point, I am considering the 2025 first pick gone. They still have the 2025 second pick from Sacramento. That is the only pick I expect the Bulls this year. Move on to 2026. And listen, that's not a bad mindset to have. I'm glad the Bulls aren't going to undervalue their players in the trades to get garbage in return. That doesn't fit there. You already said that, Beast. How's it going, Hayes? Hope your family in California are not affected by the fires. Air quality is brutal in Long Beach. They're in Oxnard, so I do have to check on them. But thank you for thinking about my family, brother. I appreciate that. So I want to get into this next topic, right? Billy Donovan. And you guys know, I'm not a Billy Donovan guy. Anytime Billy Donovan makes mistakes, I call him out, as I think everybody who's being objective should be. But in being objective, you also got to call out some of the good things that somebody does, regardless of how you feel about them, right? And I don't know if Winton's in here yet. I know Winton, this is going to be the Winton Mahorn triggering segment. But I think it's time to give Billy Donovan credit for some things. Now, I'm not in any way saying all of a sudden Billy Donovan's this amazing coach that's going to coach the Bulls to glory. I'm not saying that. But when you look at what Billy Donovan has done, in reality, right, Billy Donovan has completely changed the offensive system. And something that he paid lip service to the last 2 years, but we never really got to see a tangible change in that. That has changed drastically for the Bulls. They're playing with one of the fastest paces in the NBA, not the fastest anymore. The Memphis Grizzlies have passed them up in pace, but still a very fast pace. We've completely modernized our offense and our shot profile, something that he talked about for 2 years before it finally happened. And now we're starting to see Billy Donovan think that this is what keyed it in, right? For so much of this season, the Chicago Bulls lived and died by the three, meaning that even when the three ball wasn't falling, the Chicago Bulls still took a huge amount of three-pointers. But what we're seeing from the Bulls lately in the last handful of games, about 3 games, right, is that when the three ball isn't falling for the Chicago Bulls, the offense actually changes and they go into attack mode. So they're actually, I dare say, Billy Donovan is making adjustments. Do I dare say it? Because that's what it looks like. Billy Donovan is actually making adjustments. And for some, like, it's not easy for coaches to completely overhaul a system from what it was to what Billy Donovan has this now. Now, of course, not having a player like DeMar DeRozan, who basically only plays in the half court, right? That goes a long way in changing the pace. So, yeah, you were going to change it a little bit there. The shot profile changing. We don't even necessarily have the most amazing three-point shooters, but we have completely changed it, right? I got to give Billy Donovan credit for that. Got to give him credit for that. And here's what I'll say. The coaching staff credit for that. Because it could be part of Dan Craig and Wes Unseld coming over here that helped change that, right? We know that Wes Unseld is the architect of the defense. Who's to say that Billy Donovan hasn't really leaned on those guys to implore a different offense, which is very possible. But even if that's the case here, you still got to give a little bit of credit for Billy Donovan to get out the way to allow that to happen, right? And then another thing that I want to give Billy Donovan credit for as well is the repaired relationship with Zach LaVine. When's the last time you saw something to where it felt like Zach LaVine, there was tension between Zach LaVine and Billy Donovan? And it's not like it's because Zach LaVine is just allowed to do whatever he wants to do out there. Zach LaVine is playing within the structure of the system. He's averaging more points off assist than any point of his career, right? Because he has better teammates. He's buying into that. And when the Bulls need him, when they need Zach LaVine to really step up and to go off scoring wise, he still has the ability to do that. The only thing, like, Zach LaVine would be getting more credit for the way that he's been playing this year if the Bulls were winning more basketball games. Like, and it's weird to be in this place because I have absolutely killed Billy Donovan for at least the last 2.5 years. And I got to say this. And hopefully this just reminds you guys of how objective that I truly try to be, right? Because I really, really, really have disliked Billy Donovan's coaching. And I'm not saying that it's all perfect yet. I'm not all of a sudden turning this thing around and be like, oh, God, we got to keep Billy Donovan. But I do want to acknowledge the things that he has done well and the things that this coaching staff has done well because they have improved some things. Now, we're still a team that defense sucks. We're still a team that at times doesn't call timeouts when we need to. Some of the rotations are a bit baffling at times as well, right? So there's still negatives there. It's not like I'm turning a blind eye to some of the negatives in regards to Billy Donovan. I just want to take some time out to just acknowledge that Billy has adapted a little bit. And it is what it is there. Hayes says Billy's a coach. Shocking. That's hilarious. Eric says, I never heard Hayes talk so highly of Billy LMAO, but I agree, though. Hey, listen, it's objective there. It's Billy Donovan Jr. pulling dad strings. That is hilarious. If I'm not mistaken, Wes was part of the coaching staff in Orlando, and Nikola Vucevic was his best season. Was that? I know Wes Unseld came from Denver. I don't know if Wes Unseld was in Orlando at the same time as Vooch, but I can check that real quick. Give me a second. 2012 to 2015. So I don't off the top of my head remember Vucevic's best seasons, but it would have been some overlap there with Vucevic for sure. So let's see real quick. Give me 1 second. Let's see. Let's take a look at some of Vucevic's best years real quick. I love it when look at Shay actually with a good question. Give Shay some props. So Wes Unseld would have been there for 3 years with Nikola Vucevic. They weren't his best seasons, though. That's when Vucevic was still young. Vucevic averaged 14 points, 19 points, and 18 points when Wes Unseld Jr. was there. So there you go on that one, Shay. But good call out, Shay. Good call out. But with that said, next up, we're going to be talking about the Bulls making a decision on their last non-guaranteed contract on the roster. That comes from THT. We'll get into that right after a message from Game Time. Win or lose, rain or shine, there's nothing like being there in person at a live event. Whether it's a big game, a concert, or comedy show, Game Time makes it easier than ever to find great tickets at amazing prices. With their new feature, Game Time Picks, you can skip the endless scrolling and get right to the best deals on incredible seats. It's all about saving you time and money while finding the perfect tickets. Plus, you can use the super deal option to score top-notch seats at unbeatable prices. Game Time also has features that make buying tickets stress-free, like all-in pricing, no surprise fees at checkout, and a panoramic seat view so you know exactly what your view is going to look like before you even buy your ticket. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. More Locked On Bulls coming up next. All right, Bulls fans. So before we get out of here today, I got to update you guys on the roster decision that was made. And THT's deal became fully guaranteed as of last night. I think it was around 6 p.m. last night, if I'm not mistaken. So that is now locked in THT for the remainder of the season, and it also locks in the Chicago Bulls full roster. The Bulls are the only team in the NBA with a fully guaranteed roster, meaning that all 15 members of the main roster are fully guaranteed. So what does that mean for the Chicago Bulls going forward? Well, it does lock in a veteran player that is giving you okay production on okay minutes. He's okay, right? He's a back end of the bench player. It's not like THC is like cracking the rotation for 20, 25 minutes, right? But it does allow that. It also allows the Bulls to have another very cost control contract that can be included in any deal if they make one. Again, that's highly unlikely, right? But it just locks in a player that is cool, right? THC is not actively hurting you. That's why it's not. I don't mean it as like to like slight THC. I just mean like THC is the level of deal that doesn't hurt you. It can do more good than bad depending on the game. And it just is what it is, right? So, THC has played pretty well here for the Chicago Bulls for the role that he's been given. Now, I would say the last 10, 15 games for THC have been cheeks. But, at the end of the day, we had 15 games of cheeks Kobe White and getting paid almost more than double what THC is getting. So it's going to happen. It comes with the territory, right? But at this point, they just got to figure it out. And so if the Bulls do get into some trade talk at some point in time, they don't have the flexibility of cutting anybody to create an open roster spot. So basically any deal that the Chicago Bulls do, they have to match the players exactly. And, that is what it is. I don't think that that's going to be a detriment to anything if the Bulls do want to move or Torrey Craig or anything like that. I don't think that's going to be something we look back on and we're like, hey, why did we fully guarantee THT? And that's really what this is about, right? Is that THC is not a player that actively hurts you. And I think as long as that's the case, that's fine. That's fine. Hold on. I'm trying to bring up this comment from Shay. All due respect to THC, I would have saved that last contract for EJ Liddell or Adama. The dude looks out of shape now. There were a couple of months into the season. Well, the thing is that EJ Liddell and Adama Sanogo are still on two-way contracts. They can play up to 65 games on their two-way contract. So, and they haven't nearly sniffed that. We don't even have 65 games left. So technically, if the Chicago Bulls wanted to call up THC or Adama Sanogo, they can do so at any point in time. They could play the rest of the season in the Bulls uniform if need be. So I get what you're saying in that, but it really doesn't limit any flexibility for the Bulls in that case, right? JDA says we're going for the 10th seed. Now, we've been going for the 10th seed, brother, unfortunately. That seems like the route that we've been going for a while. And, when it comes down to it, and I asked this question over on Chicago Bulls Central. I would love for you guys to go over there and answer that question. And I'll ask this before we go here. What would the Bulls have to do for you guys in the playoffs? Realistically, don't start saying anything like go to the ECF. But realistically, with where this team is, what would the Bulls have to do between the play-in and the playoffs for you to feel more comfortable about losing the top 10 pick or losing a pick to the Spurs this year? What would they have to do? I would love to hear from you guys on that. Whether you're watching the video live or after the fact, let me know. How far would the Chicago Bulls have to go? What performances would you need to see from some of the young players? How many minutes would you like to see from those guys being played to make you feel like, all right, we lost the top 10 pick, but we got this? Well, what is it that would calm that down a little bit, especially for my tankers, right? My Bulls fans that want to see the Bulls tank, I would love to hear from that. In a scenario that Zach gets traded, what is a team ideal for a trade? I mean, listen, I don't have the exact teams. I'd have to sit down and do that, but there are a lot that could benefit from Zach LaVine. The question is, do they have something that would benefit the Bulls? Flockavelli says at least a second round or super hard fought first round, kind of a la the Chicago Bulls, Boston Celtics, Derrick Rose rookie year, something like that. Joe the Blacksmith, 8C minimum. Cool. Go on to the playoffs and pushing in to a game 6 win or lose. Okay, so that means at least two wins, right? Is that what you're trying to get? That's a big question. Okay, listen. I'd love for this conversation to continue. So whether you're watching this after or before, you can't watch it before. After the live stream ends, let me know you guys' thoughts on that down below. But that's my time for today. Make sure you're following us at Locked On Bulls. You can follow me personally at CEO Hayes. Locked On Bulls is free and available on every podcasting app and platform of your choice, as well as YouTube, the Odyssey app, Amazon Fire TV. We are also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every single day. You guys catch me tonight after the game. Love you guys. Go Bulls. See you, Red, y'all. Peace.